The observation deck of the HFY Dominion smelled of ozone and cold metal, and General Thren Korvath found the smell pleasing. It meant the ship's weapons were still warm from the battle that had ended 2 hours ago. It meant the humans below him, kneeling in a ragged line across the deck plating, understood exactly how close they had come to dying in open space instead of here, in front of him, where their deaths could mean something. Korvath was tall even by the standards of his own kind, plated in matte gray armor that had not been polished since the campaign began, and he walked the line of prisoners the way a man might walk a fence he was deciding whether to repair or tear down. 41 humans. Officers mostly. The survivors of a task force that had tried and failed to break the blockade around the Kestrel Belt. He had done this 11 times before on 11 other ships in 11 other systems. The pattern never changed because the pattern worked. You did not need to kill many humans to make the rest comply. You needed to kill the right one in front of the others and let their own instinct for grief do the rest of the work. Which of you commanded this vessel? Korvath said. His translator collar rendered it in flat, accentless English. No one answered. He had not expected them to. He stopped in front of a young man near the end of the line. A cadet, judging by the thin insignia on his collar, no more than 22 years old by human counting. Dirt and dried blood streaked one side of his face. His hands were bound behind him with a zip restraint, and he was looking not at Korvath's boots the way most of them did, but up directly into the general's eyes. That was unusual. Korvath found himself pausing over it. Name, Korvath said. Cadet Aiden Reyes. The young man's voice did not shake. 3rd Fleet Auxiliary Wing. You are not an officer of command. No. Then you are of no use to me as an example. Korvath had already begun to turn toward the man 3 places down the line, a colonel with gray at his temples and the stiff posture of someone used to giving orders. When Reyes spoke again. You're going to kill one of us to scare the rest, Reyes said. That's the whole plan, isn't it? You've done it before. I can tell because none of the officers flinched when you started walking the line. They've heard about you. Korvath turned back. Something about the cadet's tone was wrong for a man about to die. Not brave, exactly. Korvath had seen bravery. The tight jaw, the held breath, the eyes that refused to blink first. This was closer to the tone of a man laying down cards he had already decided to play. You volunteer, Korvath said. I'm telling you it won't work the way you think it will. Reyes held his gaze. Not on us. Not this time. Korvath had killed enough humans to recognize when one of them was stalling, buying second for something. A rescue, a distraction, a weapon smuggled somewhere it shouldn't be. He glanced at the guards flanking the line. Nothing. No alarms. No sudden movement among the other prisoners. Just a young man in restraints, for seconds from death, apparently more interested in making a point than in begging for his life. It didn't matter. The lesson had to be delivered to someone, and the boy had made himself the obvious choice by opening his mouth. Then let it not work, Korvath said, and drew the sidearm at his hip and shot Cadet Aiden Reyes through the chest. The sound was small in the wide, ozone-scented dark of the observation deck, a short, flat crack that didn't seem to deserve what it did. Reyes folded sideways and down, and one of the other prisoners, a woman near the front, made a sound that was not quite a scream, and the colonel with the gray temples closed his eyes. Korvath held the sidearm loose at his side and watched the body settle against the deck plating, the way he had watched 11 bodies settle before it, waiting for the particular stillness that told him the lesson had landed, waiting for the fear to spread down the line like current through wire. It came at first. He saw it in the shoulders of the prisoners nearest the body, the way they drew inward. He saw the colonel's jaw tighten. He did not see it in all of them. 3 of the officers near the back of the line were not looking at the body. They were looking at their wrists, or rather at the crude bracelets of woven cord and metal wire that several of them wore beneath their uniform sleeves, service mementos, the kind of thing soldiers carried from a dead friend or a child back home. He filed the detail away as sentiment and dismissed it, and turned to address the colonel. That was when Cadet Aiden Reyes's hand closed around his wrist. For seconds. That was all it had been. Korvath would replay those 4 seconds more times than he could later count, and the count would never make the interval feel longer than it was. For seconds between the shot and the grip, and in that time the boy's body had done nothing that any of the alien physicians on the Dominion would later be able to fully explain. No visible breath, no twitch of muscle, nothing that should have preceded what came next. The hand did not grope. It did not flail the way a body in shock might, nerves firing randomly on their way to shutdown. It reached with total deliberate accuracy across 11 inches of open deck, past the restraint that should have kept it pinned, and it closed around Corvatha's wrist with a grip that felt less like flesh than like something mechanical, something built for exactly this and for nothing else. Corvatha's first instinct was to pull away. He was strong, stronger, by a wide margin, than any human physiology had a right to match, and he expected the hand to come loose the way a dying grip should, the way muscle failed when the mind behind it had already gone dark. It did not come loose. He looked down. Reyes's eyes were open, not blank, not rolled back, open and focused, and fixed on Corvatha's face with an expression that was not pain and was not fear. It was something closer to satisfaction. For seconds, Reyes said. His voice had gone thin and wet, but the words were clear. Took longer than I thought it would. You move slow for someone your size. Corvatha's translator collar rendered the words, and for a moment the general simply stood there, weapon still loose in his other hand, unable to process the sentence as anything other than an error in the translation software. Dead men did not critique the speed of their own killers. Guards, Corvath said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Two of the armored escorts moved forward, weapons half-raised, uncertain what threat they were supposed to be neutralizing. One of them reached for Reyes's shoulder to pull him back. Don't touch him, Corvath said, and the guard froze, because in 11 campaigns none of his subordinates had ever heard that particular note in the general's voice before. Reyes's grip did not loosen. If anything, in the seconds that followed, Corvath felt it tighten further, the fingers finding some deeper purchase against the plates of his gauntlet, working past the seam at the wrist joint where armor gave way to the thinner mesh beneath. He felt something small and cold press against his skin there, a pressure no larger than an insect, gone before he could be certain he'd felt it at all. Then Reyes's eyes lost their focus all at once, the way a held breath finally lets go, and the hand went slack, and the body that had been Cadet Aiden Reyes settled the rest of the way to the deck, and did not move again. Corvath stood over it for a long moment, his own wrist held slightly away from his body, as if it belonged to someone else. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Dominion's chief surgeon, a narrow, unhurried woman named HFY Threll, examined Corvatha's wrist 40 minutes later in the ship's medical bay, working with the particular silence of someone who suspected she was not going to like what she found and was in no rush to confirm it. There's a puncture, she said finally, sub-millimeter, through the mesh, into the tissue beneath. Whatever caused it is no longer at the puncture site. Then where is it? Moving. She turned a scanner toward him, and on its narrow display, a single point of light pulsed somewhere in the muscle of his forearm, drifting with slow, unhurried purpose along a vein. It's modal, self-directed. I don't have the equipment on this ship to identify its composition without extracting it, and extraction would mean cutting deeper than I'd like on a limb attached to a general who still needs to use his hand. Extract it, General. Threll set the scanner down. I want to be careful about what I say next, because I don't think you're going to want to hear it, and I don't think being angry at me will change it. That boy didn't grab your wrist by accident, and he didn't do it out of some reflex you can dismiss with a physiology lecture. Human musculature doesn't reach across open space and lock onto a target 4 seconds after cardiac arrest. Not accurately, not with intent legible enough that the prisoner spoke a full sentence afterward. Someone built that reflex into him deliberately and gave him a device to deliver with it, which means the 4 seconds weren't a malfunction of his dying body. They were the length of time it took the device to confirm a target and fire. Corvath said nothing for a while. Outside the small viewport of the medical bay, the wreckage of the human task force still drifted, dark hulks tumbling slowly against the starfield, waiting for the Dominion salvage crews to begin their work. You're telling me the boy planned this? I'm telling you the boy chose this, Threll said. There's a difference. A plan is something handed to you. A choice is something you decide to carry out even when it costs you everything you have left. I don't know which one applies here. I only know that whatever's in your arm right now was put there on purpose by someone who had less than 5 seconds of functioning body left to work with, and used every one of them. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They could not extract it. Threll tried twice over the following 2 days, and both times the device, whatever it was, relocated deeper into the muscle before the instruments could close on it, as if it could sense the approach of a blade. On the third attempt it settled somewhere along the radius bone itself, embedded close enough to marrow that further extraction risked the use of Korvatha's hand entirely, and the general, with visible reluctance, ordered her to stop. "Then tell me what it does," he said. "I don't know yet. It isn't transmitting, as far as I can tell. No signal leaving your body, nothing I can trace. It might simply be dormant, or it might be doing something I don't have the instruments to detect." Threll hesitated. "There's a third option, General, and I want to say it plainly because I think you'd rather hear it from me than discover it yourself. It might not be doing anything at all. It might exist purely so that you'd know it was there, so that every hour from now on you'd wonder." Korvath did not answer that. He left the medical bay and did not return to it. And for 11 days the Dominion continued its course toward the rendezvous point at the edge of the Kestrel Belt, and nothing happened. And the general told himself that Threll's third option was the correct one, and that a dead cadet had spent his last 4 seconds of life planting nothing more than a splinter of fear under an alien general's skin, and that the fear alone had been the entire weapon. He almost believed it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 9 days before the Dominion took the Kestrel Belt, in a cramped briefing room aboard the human cruiser Meridian, Cadet Aiden Reyes had sat near the back of a room full of officers twice his rank and listened to a woman named Commander Okafor explain, in a voice stripped of every unnecessary word, exactly how badly the coming battle was going to go. "We are not going to hold the belt," Okafor said. "I want that understood before anyone asks a question that assumes otherwise. Third Fleet does not have the numbers, and Command knows it does not have the numbers, and Command is sending us anyway, because losing this fight buys the evacuation convoys at Perrin's Reach 11 more days than they'd have otherwise. That is the entire mission. We are not here to win. We are here to be expensive." No one in the room had argued with her. Reyes remembered that clearly, the particular silence of people who had already done the math themselves and arrived at the same number. "Here is the part that matters for the people in this room specifically," Okafor went on. "Intelligence has a consistent pattern on the alien commander we expect to take this engagement, a General Korvath. 11 confirmed prior engagements. In every one, following a successful boarding or surrender, he personally executes one prisoner in front of the others, not an officer, not a leader, always someone chosen at random or near enough to it, to break morale before processing the rest as captives. It is efficient. It has worked 11 times. Survivors from 2 of those engagements confirm he does this within the first hour, always in view of the others, always with his own sidearm." Reyes had raised his hand then, and Okafor had nodded at him. And he'd asked the question that had, in the following 9 days, become the reason a compact research team from Fleet Intelligence flew out to the Meridian under a level of secrecy usually reserved for things with far larger price tags than one cadet's life. "If we know he's going to do that," Reyes had said, "and we know it's going to be someone chosen at random, what if it wasn't random? What if we made sure it was someone specific, and that someone was carrying something?" It had taken the intelligence team 6 days to build the device, working from a design that had apparently been sitting half-finished in a research archive for years, waiting for a use case grim enough to justify finishing it. A subdermal marker keyed to a compressed relay signal, designed to be delivered by touch and to survive dormant for weeks inside a host who would have no idea it had ever changed hands. It had taken them 2 more days to explain to Reyes, plainly and without softening any part of it, that the device required contact after the host's heart had already stopped, that the delivery mechanism relied on a neuromuscular trigger they could implant but could not fully guarantee would fire, and that in all likelihood the volunteer who carried it would not survive long enough to see whether it worked. Reyes had not asked for time to think about it. Okafor, watching him agree in the same flat, unhurried tone he'd use later on the Dominion's observation deck, had asked him once, privately, why not? Because you already told us Third Fleet isn't here to win, Reyes had said. You told us we're here to be expensive. I figured I might as well be expensive on purpose, instead of just being a number on a casualty report, because I happened to be standing in the wrong line when he started walking it. He had not told her the rest of what he was thinking, because he didn't think it would have changed anything if he had. That he had spent the 2 days since volunteering turning the plan over in his mind, again and again, and had arrived at a small, strange comfort in it. Most soldiers who died in this war would never know if their deaths accomplished anything at all. He would know, or at least he would have a better chance of knowing than almost anyone else in Third Fleet, because his death had been built, deliberately, to be the mechanism of the next battle rather than merely the cost of the last one. On the 12th day, Threll came to his quarters without being summoned, which he had never done before, and Corvath understood from the set of her shoulders that the third option was no longer the correct one. It moved, she said. 2 hours ago. I've had a passive monitor on the injection site since the extraction attempts failed. Low priority, mostly out of professional stubbornness. It shifted position, general. Not far. But it moved for the first time in 11 days, and it moved toward the surface. Toward what purpose? I don't know. But I know when it moved, because I cross-referenced the timestamp against ship's logs out of habit. She met his eyes, and for the first time since he had known her, Threll looked less like a surgeon and more like someone bringing news of a death. It moved 40 seconds after the Dominion received a compressed data burst from long-range sensors. A burst that came from a human relay buoy at the edge of the belt. General, I think it's listening for something. I think it's been sitting quietly in your arm for 11 days waiting to hear a signal, and 2 hours ago, it heard the beginning of one. Corvath was on his feet before she finished the sentence, already moving toward the command deck, already calling for the fleet sensor logs, already understanding, with the cold, falling clarity of a man watching a trap close around him from the inside, that Cadet Aiden Reyes had not spent his last 4 seconds planting a fear. He had spent them placing a beacon. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The command deck of the Dominion was built in tiers around a central holographic well, and when Corvath arrived the well was already crowded with the pale blue threads of the fleet's sensor returns. Dozens of ships arrayed in their patrol formation around the salvage operation at the edge of the belt. His fleet commander, a broad, steady officer named Vesic, looked up as he entered. General, we picked up chatter on a human military frequency 40 minutes ago. Encrypted, low power, consistent with short-range fleet coordination. We assumed it was residual traffic from wreckage automated systems. We didn't flag it as a threat. Show me the source. Vesic gestured, and a cluster of faint returns bloomed at the edge of the holographic field, well beyond the Dominion's patrol perimeter, arranged with a precision that no drifting wreckage could account for. That's not wreckage, Corvath said. That's a formation. General, our long-range scans show no active engines in that cluster. No thermal signature consistent with. They're running cold. Corvath felt the shape of the trap settling over him now, piece by piece, with the sick clarity of a man recognizing a familiar pattern 1 beat too late. Ships running cold, engines dark, drifting into position over 11 days disguised as debris, while every scan we ran to confirm the battlefield was clear returned exactly what we expected to see, because we were looking for wreckage, and wreckage was what we were shown. To what end? They can't take the Dominion with a handful of cold-running vessels. General, our sensors would have. Your sensors were never the target, Corvath said, and lifted his arm. The one Threll had examined 11 days ago, the one that had gone quiet and patient and was, he understood now, with the particular fury of a man who has just watched an enemy's design complete itself inside his own body, no longer quiet at all. I am the target. I am wearing their targeting solution in my own arm, Vesic, and it has just told an entire hidden fleet exactly where the flagship carrying it currently sits. For a moment the command deck was silent except for the low hum of the holographic well. Then Corvath said, "Get me Threll. Now," and signaled the fleet to disperse. Full evasive spread, Immediately, don't wait for my mark. The order came 4 seconds too late. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The human fleet that emerged from cold-running silence at the edge of the Kestrel Belt was smaller than the task force that had lost the battle 11 days before, 9 ships against the Dominion's 23, but it did not need to be larger, because it was not trying to win a battle. It was trying to win a single precise strike, and every one of its weapons had been aimed, refined, and ranged not against the broad hull of a warship, but against a single moving point of light that had been quietly reporting its exact position, deck, and bearing for the better part of 2 hours before the first shot was ever fired. Corvath understood this in the 11 seconds it took the Dominion's point defense systems to engage the incoming fire. Standing on a command deck that had gone from routine to catastrophe faster than any drill had ever prepared his crew to manage. And he understood, with a clarity that had nothing left in it of anger, only of grim and total comprehension, exactly what Cadet Aiden Reyes had done, and exactly why he had done it in 4 seconds instead of trying, hopelessly, to survive. The boy had known he was going to die on that deck the moment the general's sidearm cleared its holster. He had known it long before that, in fact, known it from the moment his task force lost the battle for the belt, known it from whatever briefing had told him and every officer in that line that the alien general who took the system would do exactly what he had done 11 times before. Reyes had not tried to survive the 4 seconds after the shot. He had used them, every ounce of will his dying body still possessed, aimed not at living, but at making his death cost something. A tracer keyed to a signal his own fleet would send once it had drifted, unnoticed and unhurried, into position around the very general it was meant to kill. He had not needed to win the fight in the observation deck. He had only needed to mark the man who would walk away from it. General. Vesik's voice cut through the rising klaxons. Recommend immediate withdrawal to secondary formation. The flagship cannot hold this position. No. Corvath's voice was very quiet, and it carried anyway, the way it always had. They built this around my position, specifically. If I move, they retarget. If I stay, every shot they've spent 11 days calculating lands exactly where they intended. He looked at the holographic well, at the pale threads of incoming fire converging on the Dominion from 9 directions with a coordination that 11 previous campaigns had never once shown him from a human fleet, and understood that there was no maneuver, no formation, no order he could give in the next several seconds that would undo what for seconds, 11 days ago, had already decided. Signal Threll, he said. Tell her to cut it out. Now. Whatever damage it does to the arm, I don't care. General, even if she extracts at this instant, the signal's already. I know. Corvath did not look away from the well. I'm not asking her to save the ship, Vesik. I'm asking her to take the last thing that boy has of mine away from him before I lose it too. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They did not save the ship. The Dominion took 4 direct strikes in the space of 90 seconds, each one landing with a precision that felt less like combat and more like execution. A fitting symmetry, though Corvath was too occupied with the collapsing bulkheads around him to appreciate it in the moment. The command deck lost pressure 11 seconds after the 3rd strike, and Corvath, sealed into an emergency void suit by crew members who moved with the practiced speed of people who had drilled for this exact catastrophe and never truly believed they would need it, watched through a cracked viewport as 2 of his escort cruisers broke apart under fire meant, originally, only for him. He survived. That detail would matter later, in ways he could not yet see. Survival meant testimony, meant reports that would reach other alien commanders, meant a story that would travel through the Dominion fleet with a particular speed reserved for stories that terrify the people telling them. But in the moment, as the evacuation pod, carrying what remained of his command staff, pulled away from the dying flagship, survival felt like the smallest and least relevant fact in the universe. Threll had gotten the device out in the end, cut deep into his forearm with nothing but a field kit and 11 seconds of warning, working through the tremor of a ship coming apart around her, and dropped a sliver of alien-built machinery no larger than a grain of sand into a specimen container that she then, without asking permission, threw out an airlock before the pod detached. Corvath did not ask her why. He understood. Some things you did not carry with you, even after they had stopped working, especially after they had stopped working. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 months later, in a debriefing chamber on the Dominion homeworld, General Thren Corvath stood before a council of his superiors and told them, in full, what had happened at the Kestrel Belt. The boy who would not lower his eyes, the 4 seconds, the grip that should not have been possible, the tracer that had turned a routine execution into the most costly single strike the humans had landed in the entire campaign. He did not tell it as a warning against mercy. There had been no mercy in the observation deck that day, and he was honest enough, even now, to admit that mercy would not have changed the outcome. The boy had chosen his death regardless of what Corvath did with the sidearm, because the choice had never been the general's to make in the first place. It had been made 11 days before the trigger by a cadet who understood, with a clarity that Corvath was still learning to hold, that the value of a life was not fixed by how long it lasted, but by what it was spent on in the seconds that remained. He told it, instead, as a warning against certainty. 11 campaigns had taught him that fear traveled down a line of prisoners like current through wire, and 11 campaigns had been correct, right up until the 12th, when a boy with 4 seconds left had rewritten what fear was for. The council did not ask him whether he intended to continue the campaign at the Kestrel Belt. There was no longer a campaign to continue. The Dominion fleet had withdrawn from the sector 2 months prior, following losses the council's own reports now attributed, with a specificity that made Corvath's jaw tighten every time he read it, to asymmetric tactical innovation by human forces of markedly lower material strength. He did not correct the phrasing. It was accurate enough in its bloodless way. It simply left out the part that Corvath now carried with him into every room he entered, the way another man might carry a scar, that the innovation in question had not been a weapon, or a formation, or a piece of hidden technology. It had been 4 seconds, spent by a boy who had already decided how he was going to die, and had refused, in the time remaining to him, to let that decision belong to anyone else. Somewhere in a records office on the human colony of Perrin's Reach, a name was added to a wall that had been built to hold names of exactly this kind. Not admirals, not decorated commanders, just the ordinary dead who had happened to be standing in the right place when the war needed something from them. Cadet Aiden Reyes, 3rd Fleet Auxiliary Wing. No citation described what he had done, because most of what he had done was still classified, and would remain so for years. The plaque beneath his name held only a single line, chosen by Commander Okafor herself, who had read every draft the record keepers sent her and rejected all of them, until she wrote one that didn't try to make his death sound larger than it had actually needed to be. He used what time he had. It was not a grand epitaph. It did not need to be, for seconds had been enough.